Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dion's Daily Dose. Today, we are featuring Andrew Horning, who is another candidate for United States Senate. And we talked to Andy a couple of years ago when he ran in the past. And like a couple of days ago, we had one of the Republican challengers on. So we're going to have Andy on to find out where he stands and what he believes, especially compared to, I think we had Rust on last time. As always, we're still reaching out to Jim Banks. I'm really hoping that he chooses to come onto the show and, talk to people directly. We'll see what happens, ladies and gentlemen. I will report to you as soon and if we hear from him. But more importantly, remember that you have options on your ballot, whether it's a Democrat, a Republican, a Libertarian, or independents. I am no longer a candidate for any office, so I can actually say what's on my mind without having to, tiptoe and pretend. Some of the rules are very, very particular when it comes to assisting other candidates from other political parties. They can toss you off the ballot. They can do all kinds of stuff, but that's not the case anymore. We can have an actual conversation without me having to tiptoe. So I'm personally very, very happy about that. So without further ado, we have Andy Horning here with us, and he is running for United States Senate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring him on to say hi, and then I'm going to actually dip out and make him full screen so that he can introduce himself to you. Here we are.
Oh,
there we are.
Thanks,
Andy. Good to see you. I'm gonna pop out and make you full screen so that you have an opportunity to introduce yourself to the people at home.
Okay. Well, it's very rare that I get to be full screen or get full consideration in the media in any kind of sense, and that's always been the case. And we libertarians are used to it. But I am Andy Horning. I have recently written the book Relighting the Torch. It's available on Amazon. I've got an audiobook version. I've got print, hardcover and paperback and Kindle edition. And really, that's my defense of constitutional rule of law. So far, I'm the only candidate who's actually even running for the constitutional office of U.S. Senator for the state of Indiana. And there are specific roles for that nobody else ever talks about. And in fact, if they're part of the two-party system, they really can't. And I'd be happy to get into that at some point. But really, the issue here is the way our government is supposed to work is not at all the way it is working. And a good part of what my book is about is talking about the way constitutional rule of law is supposed to work, how and why we departed that sort of constitutional design, how it actually is written, because I have the whole Constitution and Declaration of Independence in the book, and they're including my annotations, so you can see where I think we messed up and what it actually says. So there's really no doubt. You can read the words yourself and make your mind up about what is actually written, and then my suggestions for how to set this all right. And just as is kind of a what we all know is that our government is corrupt. One thing that I'm grateful to Donald Trump for, not that I like the guy, but I'm grateful that his presence in our society and as president really revealed just how messed up our government is, how corrupt and, really, I think he opened the eyes of an awful lot of people. Because we've been so complacent, and now that people are starting to get uncomfortable, it says in the Declaration of Independence that mankind are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. I better get this right. I don't want to do a Biden thing and say never mind, or, the thing. Than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. In other words, we tend to put up with an awful lot until we're actually suffering, and that suffering has to reach a point that really pushes us into action. And I believe we're finally coming close to a tipping point with all of the things coming down from the WEF, Agenda 2030, the obvious corruption we've seen from both Democrat and Republican parties that we can no longer really ignore. And I think that is hitting people in the pocketbook now. The purchasing value of the dollar has dropped tremendously. And now with the BRICS nations actually expanded by 6 as of this month, with a new monetary consortium and new trade agreements and moving off the dollar, I think we're going to see that the long-term trend is that the United States has been screwing up for too long, and we're going to have to make some adjustments, either by our own design and with intent and disciplined action, or in slack-jaw surprise when it all comes tumbling down around us. So anyway, this is all in my book, and this is going to be sort of the meat of my campaign, talking about things that other people can't, when everybody else is still talking about, abortion and gun rights and things like that. We have bigger, deeper issues than that. We have things far more important than what we've been talking about. And that's what I'm hoping to feature in my campaign.
Okay. All right. Phenomenal. So what's the name of the book again?
It's called Relighting the Torch.
Relighting the Torch.
And it's available on Amazon. Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
The cover art is actually, it shows Lady Liberty and a torch is the smoke coming out. The light is on. The flame is gone. So it's cute.
Okay. I will agree with you that, there we go. I think I found it. Just because I want to, there it is. I want to make sure people get the right one. Let's see here. One thing that we've seen over and over is the.
Yeah, that's it.
There we go.
That's the one.
Yeah, there we go.
My youngest son actually. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's good rating. My son actually did the cover art on that. My youngest son.
That's cool. I really like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. Okay, let's see here. Let's go back to that. There we go. So what made you decide to run for U.S. Senate? It's a big seat. Yeah,
it's a big one. And it's not without some trepidation because, Indiana, it's not the biggest state, but it's not a small state either. And, I'm going to be traveling all over the state. But a couple of things have conspired to make it a little bit more interesting just this year. I am, now retired. I'm retired from my full-time career as of this past year, and working only part-time in a clinical position now. And so I'm going to have more time, and my kids are all grown and gone, and so I will be able to put a little more effort into this than I have in the past. So, it's a big office. But it's also the case that libertarians often have some of their best candidates in what they call winnable races, these lower races that even when they win them, nobody ever notices it. And it's kind of frustrating that there are now 20 elected libertarians in Indiana, and nobody knows it. Nobody knows it. Nobody knows. A lot of libertarians don't know it. And so the fact that, that we win races and nobody hears about it, and yet we're always told that libertarians can't win, even though we have won. We've had, not in this state, but in other states, we've had libertarians in the state house. We had, of course, Justin Amash was in the U.S. House of Representatives as a libertarian, only briefly. But no, it's frustrating that we have this. We play games with elections, and there's so much that's just not true. The way elections work, the way politics works is not at all the way we're told. And one of the things that I've always tried to do is let people know that our government is not, it's not what it's supposed to be. It doesn't work the way it's supposed to. In fact, you can argue that it doesn't work at all. It's inherently divisive. The two-party system is, obviously inherently divisive, and it's tearing us to bits. And we really ought to be thinking about, tearing it to bits.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. One of the things that I noticed when I ran for office is it's not even really a two-party system. It's more of a uniparty system. And I didn't understand what that really meant when I first, dipped my feet into it. But it's becoming more and more clear. And I wholeheartedly agree with you as far as one of the things that I do like is that Trump exposed that he showed these people are not working for your interests. The swamp, A, is far greater than you think, and B, actively works against the people of the United States.
Right. And that's where, we've been warned by lots of presidents even. So, you had Eisenhower was famous for the military industrial complex. But in that same speech, people keep forgetting that he also talked about the scientific and technological elite. And, at that time, that was just really the CIA and FBI. But now, of course, we've got Facebook, Google, infinite number of ways of spying and twisting information. And the information systems themselves have been so co-opted and corrupted that, most of what we hear is lies. And the fact that, we've got more of a corporate, it's kind of a crony capitalist corporatism as opposed to anything like free market capitalism. And that's where it's difficult to talk about free markets because people have the wrong idea about what we've got now. We don't have any free market system. We've got, a corporatized system where corporations are government entities. And this is another thing where even libertarians get this wrong, where they think that that private businesses, Google is a private business. No, it's not. It was largely funded, initially and started with a lot of, NSA, CIA code and money. And, the fact that they've been cooperating with government ever since, Facebook, Google, all the big tech giants had a lot of money and expertise and influence from our spy agencies. And because now we've gotten to the point where our legislatures don't write laws. I mean, most of our laws are written by unelected bureaucrats and executive agencies. And most of what we think of as the way laws are written is bunk because, you got like 20-year-old interns that are doing a lot of the writing with input from lobbyists and bundlers. And, you have full-time staffers, partisan staffers that outlive all of these politicians. And they are far more powerful in crafting law than the politicians themselves.
So, absolutely.
You look at these multi-thousand page bills, which, they're horrendous. And I talk about all this in my book, of course, but, the gist of it, really, I mean, if you get right down to it, is that our government is ungoverned. There are no rules that are recognizable to any of us, really. It's just all based on, what the cronies want. And it's shocking how powerful people like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and, people who are not at all elected, how much power they actually have in our government. And of course, China. China's got tremendous power in our government.
So that leads me to one question that I have for you, which is, what do you think the greatest geopolitical enemy is for the United States right now?
Well, we don't need any enemies other than ourselves.
Thank you. Okay.
So frankly, China, as much as they want to be our biggest, enemy, I mean, since 2012, when, Xi Jinping, took the reins of China, more or less, they have been in their what they call unrestricted warfare mode with us. And that's there's no secret about that. And it's in some ways subtle, but it's not like it's not obvious too. They've been using our own money to buy us off and to infiltrate our government and our universities. And that there are a lot of Chinese people pouring across our southern border right now, and that there are police, actually Chinese police in the United States right now. And it's not like this is a secret, but it's all our fault. China has got tremendous internal problems, and they are fairly fragile right now in a lot of ways, and really empowered only by our foolishness. So, you look at what happened with the recent BRICS summit, where it was originally, just the original BRICS nations, but they just added 6 more. including Saudi Arabia. And so you've got Russia and Saudi Arabia and Iran that, I mean, now they control like half of the world's oil supply between, in the BRICS nations. And you look to see what, BRICS nations have been doing compared to the previous, G7, nations that used to have the lion's share of the global market. That's now moving in the opposite direction pretty fast. Yeah, so you brought that up there. You've got the BRICS, the original BRICS nations were Brazil, India, China, South Africa, Russia. And now that they have added Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, Egypt, there you got it, Saudi Arabia. And now, I mean, they're now member states. However, they've got trade agreements with a lot more nations than that. And so initially there were, I remember, like 100 nations that were invited to the BRICS summit, and 6 were invited to join. And the agreements now that they're crafting, while some people object, there are those who say that the BRICS summit was like what they call a nothing burger. I hate that term, but a lot of people think that it's no big deal because there were BRICS, people invited to the BRICS summit who did not like the idea of opposing the United States. They were thinking more in terms of strengthening their own currencies and so on. But the fact is, they are replacing the dollar. I mean, that has been happening for some time already. And in fact, you look to see what happened when the EU formed and created the euro. The dollar dropped by, something like 46% almost immediately. And the amount of reserve currency that the United States, our share of the reserve currency dropped from I remember what it was, like 80% down to 40 some odd percent now, because the BRICS nations and the EU have taken over a lot. So we're going in the wrong direction fast. And if you think that the dollar is not backed by anything but the petrodollar system, and that's largely been because of Saudi Arabia and the OPEC nations, which are now,
now joining BRICS. Yeah.
Now in BRICS, what's going to be the market for all of these inflated dollars that have, people have been forced to trade in dollars for oil, and now it's already being replaced. And the SWIFT system that we used to use for tracking, who was doing what. Well, they're creating their own system as well. So we won't even know. We don't know exactly the financial implications, and won't for a little while. But the direction is obviously ominous. And I actually just sent out a press release about this just this past week. And I'm hoping that people will start paying attention, because what's happening there is a reaction to bad U.S. foreign policy and domestic policy, but mostly foreign policy, that where the nations that we've been trying to leverage with the U.S. dollar and with our embargoes and with our trade deals are now doing an end run around us. And they don't need, if they don't need, they say, fine, you keep your US dollars. We've got our own money now. Fine, you keep your oil market. You keep these trade agreements. We're making our own. And
what do you think the solution is? Assuming you win, right, and you get in, what can you do as senator to fight back against BRICS or utilize it to where it's not so catastrophic? I'm not sure that any one individual can stop it, obviously.
There you go. But, and here's the sticky thing. There is nobody within government, no single person really has got a whole lot of power inside.
Right.
Really, what would be different is if I won the Senate seat as a Libertarian. I run as a Republican before. The only election I ever won was as a Republican, and I won pretty convincingly with a lot less money than ever. I had more people on my side, and it was a good team and a great team. But the fact is, if I had won the general election, which I probably did if only living people were counted, if I had won the general election, I would not have been able to change anything any more than Thomas Massey can, or Ron Paul can. The difference would be if I win as a Libertarian, that would be a crack in the edifice of the two-party system that nobody could ignore. That would be suddenly the case. The first Libertarian who actually got elected into a federal office, Justin Amash got elected as a Republican and changed to the Libertarian Party. And some people say that's kind of cheating. So if I got actually elected as a Libertarian into the U.S. Senate, I would have a microphone in my face all the time. And, it's always been the case that, a Democrat says something, let's find a Republican to say something. Now there is a Libertarian. There'd be one Libertarian,
right,
who'd be saying different things than anybody else in that whole chamber. Out of 535 people, I would be able to say things with a straight face that they could not, because I would be talking about the corruption of the whole system that, frankly, only voters, and I hate to put it this way, but we have to start being disobedient. And there are good signs of this right now in Texas, for instance. So,
okay, I'm glad you brought up Texas, because I did want to ask you. There are a limited number, and obviously mostly Republican, but there are a limited number of actual elected officials, sans the governors who signed the 25 governors who signed to go down there. But there are a limited number of elected officials who are actually taking a side at all on what's happening in Texas. If you were elected, what would be your statement? What would you say, and how would you frame that?
well, even before any of this happened, I already put down in my book, and I've had it in my annotated Constitution that it was available online and in apps for some time, that the constitutional case has already been made, that states have authority over their borders. The federal government has very little. The federal government has a duty to protect states against invasion. That's written down very specifically. And otherwise, the federal government has, the authority to, determine the rules of naturalization, but they are not ever supposed to prevent a state from protecting itself from invasion. And, that's where the states also specifically in the federal Constitution have a right to protect themselves against invasion. And, I'm not a fan of Greg Abbott. He's not a constitutionalist.
No, he's
and
not.
The Texas Constitution itself has been amended so badly over, the generations that it's a torn document anyway. But
I want to stop you real quick, because I couldn't get this in before, and I think this is the perfect opportunity. I ran across something actually online that was edited. I shouldn't say edited. That was written down, added to by you, and it's the Indiana Constitution annotated by you. And you and we had a show before, but I'm going to say, reading what you wrote, and I'm going to put the link in here for people to find it, because reading this gave me a much better insight into your mind, and a much better insight into what true constitutionalism is. You did a phenomenal job on it. I cannot give you enough credit for it,
I appreciate
because
it.
I shared it with everyone I knew, and I was like, you guys have to read this. Like, this is the same guy that was on my show before. And you could feel the passion. So I'm just going to drop that link real quick. Sorry to cut you off. By all means.
No. And I need to update that. I had both the U.S. and state constitutions on that same blog site for decades, and I have not updated the Indiana Constitution since the last stupid amendment. So I should update it, but I did update the federal Constitution annotations, but it's in my book now. And so while it was available for free on my blog site before, now you got to buy my book to get my annotated Constitution. But I've got an annotated Constitution and Declaration of Independence. So if you want to get a taste of, my hellfire and brimstone for constitutional rule of law, it's all in my book. Okay. And that's where the case for what's going on in Texas couldn't be more clear. And the Texas Constitution is a little bit unusual in that the Texas Constitution's Article 1, Section 1 actually specifies that they reserve the right. They don't use, their presence in the Union is dependent on all states being guaranteed a Republican form of government. That is, a republic. And people used to know what the word republic meant. And we do not have a republic anymore,
No.
not by the rules that our founders had written or by the understood definition of republic, which I also discuss in my book, just, very briefly. But the fact is, Texas has every right to object to the United States and even leave the Union if they wanted to, because it's in their Constitution. And our federal government has broken its side of the contract so egregiously that the Texans really have no recourse other than to defy the federal government and protect their border themselves. That's what they have to do. And to his credit, like I said, I'm not a fan of the guy, but Governor Abbott did write letters, to our federal officials several times saying, guys, come on, we need some help here, do your side of the bargain. And it's kind of like what the Declaration of Independence said, where, Jefferson wrote that, well, and, the people who helped him craft that basically made a very polite case, where we've been asking you guys, to keep your side of the bargain, give us our rights as English citizens, and you've been failing us. And so, in that Declaration of Independence, they list their grievances. There are, I don't remember how many, like 27 points. Taxation was only one. Right. And it was only taxation without our consent was the only disagreement. Most of it was that the British government, the king, was not honoring his side of the contract. Our federal government has been trampling all over the Constitution for generations. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to see that it's now, there is a constitutional case being made for the first time in a long time on any subject at all. Right. Mostly, we let the Supreme Court decide, well, this is Constitution, that's not Constitution. And that's not how it's supposed to work at all. No, and in fact, we voters are ultimately the most responsible. And we're the ones who own, it's we the people. We're the ones. Mm-hmm. It's right. I see those words right behind you. We the people. And so we're the ones who have all of the accountability. We have all of the power. Government is our collective abstraction. We're the reality in all of this stuff. And if we don't take, action and start defying, unjust laws, how many people, whether you're talking about Martin Luther King or Thomas Jefferson, how many people through how many generations have said that it's our duty to disobey unjust laws?
Right. You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, a lot of people seem to believe, rightly or wrongly, but a lot of people seem to believe that civil disobedience is posting memes or, hanging a flag, like even this, yeah, great, wonderful. But what are you actively doing to stand up against the federal government? And no one is saying, grab your rifle and go outside and start, doing anything dumb. But at the same time, we have to, as citizens of this country and as someone who wants to, leave a better country for our children, we have to start doing things that make a difference, that matter.
I'm glad you picked up. You mentioned, grabbing your gun and doing something. We've not even tried the peaceful means that we were given by our founders. And so the whole point of elections is peaceful revolution. That is the whole point. This is not about hiring politicians. Everybody's got politicians without elections. So, they hire themselves if you let them. The point is, we are supposed to fire them. And we never do that. Yes. I mean, look at the incumbent re-election rate in the U.S. House of Representatives. The last several cycles, it's been hovering around 98% or more. Mm-hmm. And that's inexcusable.
Especially when you look at the polls that show I forget the exact numbers, but somewhere around 8% of people, 8% of people believe that the Congress is working towards, for the American people that have, I think it's that have faith in Congress or whatever, like 8%. Yet we have 90+% re-election for incumbents. The two are at war with each other.
The graphs have gone the wrong way. When we had, lower re-election rates, the approval rates were higher. And so if you're looking at the graph, the approval rates go like this and the re-election rates go like this. The re-election rates for both houses of Congress have not gone below 80% since the 1980s. And that's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
And you have all these people saying, "Oh, I wish we had term limits," but then they go and rehire the incumbents. And the whole point of, and in fact, just so you know, in my book, I also have a fairly long chapter about the history and nature of the two-party system and how bad and unconstitutional and destructive it actually is.
Mhm.
And the fact is that, we were warned from the very beginning about having only two parties. We were warned against having parties to begin with. I mean,
Mhm.
George Washington's farewell address was famous for a long excoriation against political parties and factions. And
Yes.
the fact that, we have gone against all of that, all of their warnings.
Mhm.
And we didn't used to have primary elections. We didn't used to have just Democrats and Republicans. Before World War II, we had granted they were mostly socialist governments. That a lot of the Socialist Party was very big in the United States.
Mhm.
It basically the socialist movement started here before Marx and Engels made it a Europeanized phenomenon. You could argue that there were some French that started it before the Owenites of New Harmony, Indiana. But the fact is, Indiana was a hotbed of socialism. And we had the Owenites. We had, a presidential candidate who got, a pretty high percentage in, around the turn of in the 1900s, Eugene Debs. And you think about how, how powerful many parties were. And we had Know Nothings and Whigs and, Bull Moose Party. We had lots of different parties.
Mhm.
And a lot of them, had high offices. And we even still have independents in Senate. We've had, third parties winning governor's races and not too distant past. But it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And so really what we think of as the two-party system is fairly recent. And it's a deception, and it's unconstitutional, and it's
Mhm.
destructive, and it's inherently divisive. And we have the power with our finger. We can end it
Mhm.
in a single day if we wanted to. And
Right.
that's what if you're thinking about what our founders gave us, a lot of it seems abstract to people. And I will grant that even as with my aforementioned passion for the Constitution, I get that a lot of people don't care, and they're probably not going to read my book, and they're not going to be infected with my opinions on the Constitution, but they should at least understand one thing.
Mhm. Okay.
We are accountable for what happens in this country, and we
Yes.
have the power to make whatever we want happen, because all government, whether it's by the direct votes or by the the saying used to be all government is by the consent of the governed. It
Mhm.
might not be our consent, but it's at least by our participation. And
Yes.
if
Yeah.
we don't, tacitly agree with it, we still vote for it and then complain about it.
Mhm.
And the one thing our founders gave us that's in it, you can't argue otherwise. They gave us no excuse. So the fact is,
Right.
Constitution or not, we've turned against the Constitution. We
Mhm.
have turned against, their foundational principles of, free market economics and all of that stuff. But what we still have is no excuse, because we
Right.
can still vote it all away. And yes,
Yep.
there is election fraud. My campaign team proved it in 2004. We documented it very extensively, and it was very significant. A lot of people go to jail every election cycle for election fraud. That's been going on forever.
Yes.
LBJ's Box 13 scandal was famous for 200 and some odd people voting in alphabetical order in his first Senate race. So this kind of stuff has been cartoonishly obvious for a long time, and yet
And
we do nothing about it, and we
right.
can.
One of the things that I think I'm hoping, and I know the answer, but I can still hope. There was a Gateway Pundit article that came out. Guy reprogrammed a voting machine with a big pen. I shared it. Many other people have shared it, and I'm hoping. I'm just clutching to hope that at least, if nothing else, the people that have been crying, "There's no evidence. There's no evidence," will at least read the article, look at it, and allow your mind to open just a little bit, because regardless of who you like, if you like Biden, if you like Trump, if you hate them both, at least open your mind to the possibility that none of these people are working for you. Not one of them, from top to bottom, from local to, with a few exceptions. I know of, 2 or 3 people personally that are doing the best they can in the broken system that we have. But understand that there's a reason that we have such a high reelection rate. There's a reason why people are so unhappy with what's going on right now, but yet nothing seems to change. Part of it is the system, but part of it is our unwillingness to get involved. Even after these people are so unhappy and so angry with how the 2020 election came out, the 2022 turnout was abysmal. The 2023 turnout for Michigan City municipal elections was abysmal. Get your asses out there and vote, people. I'm serious. Like, it's so frustrating.
I'm only going to push back a little bit on that, because we don't want everybody to vote. The fact is, there are a lot of people that very proudly have exclaimed to me, "Oh, I'm not interested in all of this politics. Oh, I don't want to hear about it, but I do vote." And that's, it's like saying, I very proudly drive my car blindfolded because I don't want to see all this trouble out there.
And I do agree with you there. One thing that I should say, one caveat is, educated voters, get your asses out there and vote. Learn about the people on your ballot, and you're right to call that. And I should have said that, but you're absolutely right, because so many people, and that goes back to an earlier point you made, which is, if I'm with you on this, I believe that if there were no parties, that people may choose to learn a little bit more about the people running for office before they cast their vote for them.
Yep. And there's more to it than just, what we really haven't even discussed yet is how bad our information systems have twisted this whole scenario, where the fact that it's such stultified information that we get, and such narrow in scope that it's uninteresting and it seems irrelevant to us. Yeah. And so, the media have been throwing softball questions to politicians, and always in the direction of bigger government. And, how much bigger do you think government should get? How much more should government should spend? And it's always like, we need more money for education. We need more money for national defense. Nobody ever asks the really tough questions about, how this is leading to collapse, and how we're already very badly overextended. The value of the dollar has dropped 90 some odd. Well, you look at what's happened since 1913, and the purchasing value of the dollar, and how the Federal Reserve System, which was a bad idea to begin with, got worse and worse and worse. And now its chief function is to monetize political debt. And to pay for what is unconscionably and unpayably stupid, and that's
it's a slave system.
Yeah, it's terrible, and the fact that our media doesn't question it. I understand why people think that a lot of what politics is about seems irrelevant, but that's it. Coming back to what I said early on, where mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. And so, in other words, we are so used to this rotten system. We're used to being lied to. We don't expect any better. And in fact, I keep hearing, from everybody, "Oh, all you politicians are alike." How would we even know? It's all the same politicians we keep reelecting. We don't give anybody else another chance. Yeah. And that's where, if we were to use our power, in fact, let me put it another way. If we knew half as much about our role in politics as we know about, professional basketball players in basketball, then we would have a better government. We know more about sports than we know about, our rights, our responsibilities as citizens, and, the limitations, more importantly, of government. Because, you can argue that you can have a long and frustrating conversation about what are rights, what are our responsibilities as citizens. Well, what is inarguable is that there should be limitations on government's ability to take our rights, or however we define those things, their ability to take them away. Yes. So, government should not be able to, take our stuff, hurt us, or, make us do things that make no sense. And that's what we have to put a lid on. And we can put this in simple terms. And I'm not good at doing that, unfortunately. I've been told many times that I come off as too professorial or something like that. And I That's one thing that Donald Rainwater is much better than I am at. He's very relatable, and he brings up simpler issues and articulates them in a simpler way. And I've got to get better at that because I know what I'm facing. I know that the biggest problem we have is. Oh, I haven't even really been looking at these comments. I probably should have been.
Yeah, I was going to say here in just a second we're gonna
yeah, because I see it. I just saw
here.
Perry Shepard said miseducation is more dangerous than guns, and yeah, that's our information is so bad. It's
Phyllis supports you. She says you got no excuse now.
Hey, Phyllis.
Chuck Pullen case comes and says something absolutely accurate. Kennedy came in right after Eisenhower and spoke of the shadow government.
Yep.
But it's the exact same thing. Perry, you want to know if we were live? We are. Tim Dyer says hello. We have to stand up and stand firm in our resolve, which I wholeheartedly agree. Tim says he has a question for when the time comes. He says, you know him well. So go ahead and drop it in, Tim. But I think if I remember seeing, you kind of got to it. But Perry says, but when people disobey, other people say, well, you broke the law.
This is a good question. It always comes down to which law, because most of our laws today are contradictory to other laws. And if they're contradictory to the Constitution, well, they're not laws. They are null and void. And, as Jefferson said, nullification is the proper remedy. We're supposed to be nullifying things. And in fact, our government does nullify stuff all the time. It's just that they nullify the Constitution, they nullify common sense, they nullify mathematics.
Right.
So, we really ought to be, looking at what the law this. And the problem is we don't know our own laws. If we knew what was ours by law already, which is the chief role of the goal of my book really is so that people would, well, actually this is, I'm making another sidetrack here, but in Hammurabi's code, people know the Hammurabi's code. They made these big 8-foot tall stone stelae and they put them at the entrances to the city. And there are 282 laws, just 282. But the description of this was, see my laws so that you may know your case and be comforted. And the idea is that if you know the laws, even if you don't like all of them, you know how to approach things. That, okay, this is how it works. Right. If we could know what the laws are, then businesses could plan for the future. They could say, well, if this is going to stay the law, great. I'm going to be able to build a business around this. If, citizens say, okay, if this is the law, then I can own my home. I can leave this to my kids. I can build on my family's wealth. Yeah. If we could know the rules, but our rules keep changing.
Yes.
Even though the Constitution, although it's been amended, the Constitution is still way better than what we're doing. And yet people don't know it. And until it's much simpler than we've been told it is. It's much simpler.
Oh, yeah.
And I tried to lay it out as well as I can. But anyway.
Well, one of the things that I think is really, really important that I actually wasn't aware of until I read your, dissertation almost, your annotations regarding the Indiana Constitution. And that is that when modified, it doesn't stay like the U.S. Constitution. When we add amendments, it stays intact and the amendments are added on, and then you can look at how it used to be versus how it is. The Indiana Constitution has been modified in its original form so that it no longer resembles anything like the original document that existed before. And I read that and I'm like, wait a minute. And I actually looked into it, did a little research. I urge everyone, if you live in Indiana, look into this. The man makes some brilliant points into this. And it's terrifying because when you truly understand the level of deception involved and the level of change that has been enacted to our Constitution here in Indiana, it's pretty disgusting.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that, in doing the research when I originally did those annotations and looking at, old iterations of the 1851 Constitution, and you find out that it used to have nullification as a remedy written into the Constitution, and they took that out. They took it out.
There were a lot of changes. I was fascinated by all of the different changes that were involved there. Tim Dyer says peaceful and reasonable means. Perry Shepard has a different idea. One hand on the gun, one hand extending the olive branch,
Yep.
which is not wrong at all.
Yeah, it's not.
Tim Dyer's, that's where his question would go, was no political parties. Perry Shepard makes an excellent point, and that is Klaus Schwab says libertarianism is the enemy, not enemy of global domination, although not that much different. So we know the direction to take. And I agree with that. I think that brings up a great point, and that is Javier Milei, I think I say Milei from Argentina. He's self-proclaimed libertarian, and he won the highest office in the land in Argentina, marched into the WEF and told them exactly, in a very, very intelligent way, I may add. He did not call them out directly per se, but everyone watching and that heard the speech knew exactly what he was saying and exactly who he was referring to. He did it in such a way that they didn't yank him off the stage.
Very polite, very
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
yeah, and he won. But see, that's a good example of that, disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable thing. Argentina has gone. I mean, they were the fifth biggest economy in the world at one point. They turned hard towards socialism, and they went down the tubes. And people have been genuinely suffering. Their inflation rate makes ours look ridiculous, and so they had good reason to be examining themselves. And I'm glad he won. And he's been doing a great job as far as I can tell so far. So yeah.
Here's the thing, and people like to throw out various, well, look at where he went and look who he was involved with, and all of these things. Guys, but none of these people are perfect. No one. Like even the MAGA, hardcore. I used to have a Trump standee behind me because I voted for Trump. I like Trump. He's not perfect. He screwed up some very, very important things. He's a man. He's fallible, just like everyone is. So when you look at Javier Milei, is he a deep state plant? Is he this? Is he that? Maybe all of that's true, but I'll tell you, he's a damn sight better than the other options they had on the ballot.
Well, I'm seeing good signs now, and I think exactly. What's going on in Texas, what happened in Argentina, and what even is happening within the WEF is kind of showing that people are starting to resist, and that's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Perry says miseducation is more dangerous than guns, and it is in many ways, because a single firearm can only hurt so many people, but miseducation spreads like a virus. And, next thing you have people who can't, who can't even identify, who can't solve basic math, who can't identify where the Revolutionary War happened. I don't know if you've seen some of these YouTube videos where they go out and they interview college students and they ask them the simplest, most inane questions, and they struggle with it. One that I just recently saw was, if a car is traveling at 80 miles an hour, how long does it take to go 80 miles? And these two girls argued back and forth that it would take, the answer they ended up coming up with was like an hour and 45 minutes, because it takes time to get to 80 miles an hour. I kid you not. It was painful. It was absolutely painful to watch.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I guess I just saw a question from Tim that I guess is this the one you wanted to ask me, that running as a libertarian versus running as an independent. This is actually in my book also.
Okay.
It's actually almost impossible for anybody to run as an independent in Indiana for a statewide office. Nobody's been able to do it in decades. And there's a reason for that, because if you run as a Republican and you have to get signatures, it's hard, but you can, you've got a whole party to help you all across the state. You've got precinct committee people, all this kind of stuff. They can help you do the balloting, and you don't have to spend a whole lot of money. If you're an independent and you don't have that statewide organization, and you have to get twice as many signatures, they didn't make it so you have to get the same amount of signatures as a Democrat or Republican. You have to get more signatures to get on the ballot. and you don't have the organization to do it. You have to spend a lot more money. And some very, very wealthy people tried to run as an independent for statewide office for governor and U.S. Senate in recent history, and they all failed. And in fact, even getting on the presidential ballot as an independent, even if you have a national organization, you have to go state by state to do the same balloting operation. Nobody's been able to do it here. Indiana has among the best constitutions, but our Indiana code, and this, I want to make a point here. A lot of people think IC is the same as Indiana Constitution. When you see IC, section this, subsection that, that's Indiana code. And Indiana code is largely unconstitutional. And if you look into the whole section 3 of the Indiana code about elections and partisan party and election rules, is almost entirely unconstitutional. It's really bad. It's changed a lot. And the fact that it's even unfair that libertarians have an exemption that puts us in a different category from other parties. We have our own category. So we've got the Green Party, which is a registered party in Indiana, but is not in the same class as, they don't have automatic ballot access like libertarians do. And so we've got 6 categories of human when it comes to ballot access in Indiana, depending on what political party you're in or whether you're not in any political party at all. And that's nuts. And so to answer your question, Tim, I would love to be able to run as an independent, but the hurdle of just getting on the ballot is I certainly couldn't do it.
Plus, it's practically insurmountable.
And plus the overhead. I mean, it's hard enough to get media as a libertarian, but at least we get in the debates. Most, not all of them, but we get in debates. And so for U.S. Senate, there may be only one debate. If Jim Banks says no, well, I'm not going to do any more debates, they'll probably force him to do at least one. But the sort of the high-ranking, the fancy pants candidates, often they win by hiding, and if they can hide until election day, they generally win. Yeah. And if they can keep from getting themselves exposed to difficult questions, that's their best tactic, and that's why we've seen a dramatic reduction in the number of debates. And concomitantly, unfortunately, the number of people who show up and tune into debates. Right. I don't know how many public forums I've been to where the candidates and the candidate teams outnumber the number of voters in the audience, and that's also inexcusable.
Oh yeah, I've seen that personally when I ran. By the time you factored in all the people that were there, family of candidates on stage, and you had a couple of media people. There were a handful of people in the audience at best that were not connected to one candidate or another. And it's truly sad, because I think debates and forums are the best opportunity to get to know this candidate and what this candidate really is about. Not something in the newspaper where they can carefully choose their words, but a direct interaction. Obviously, meet and greets are, a better option, but a forum where they actually address some of the stuff that, and you said it before, they're treated with kid gloves. There's never any really truly epic questions asked at these things, but it's something. It's better than nothing.
And at least, they have like a hangout time afterwards, where if you're there, you can ask questions. Oh, here's a good question. That's it. How do I feel about the reason case? you can guess by everything I've said previously what I think about that. I mean, let me be clear. I actually have I had a press release about that I've sent before. I'm going to send it out again. I believe the FBI and CIA should, like as in the words of JFK himself, be torn into a million pieces and scattered to the wind. I think, in that speech that we already talked about, where he was talking about secret societies, he mentioned, the danger of secrecy, and, what do you get out of secrecy that isn't, that doesn't make it worse. And we have got a terrible problem with our spy agencies. They were corrupt from the very beginning. Even before the beginning of the FBI, when it was still called the Secret Service, and the Secret Service has morphed into something else. But before,
Yeah.
Secret Service used to do everything with counterfeiting laws and all of that stuff, and that's where they used to they would duplicate telegraph lines to tap into conversations. So
Mhm.
even way back in the days of telegraphs, there was spying that was done without warrants. And anytime you've got secrecy, anytime you've got a veil of separation between the people paying for things and the people using the money, and when you put secrecy in that, there's going to be an abuse of power, and that
Yeah,
abuse of power is going to grow. And
absolutely.
and yeah, Perry, thank you for putting that in. For you opposed to around, a monolithic and ruthless enemy, but in that case, to be fair, what JFK was talking about was more complicated than just the CIA and FBI, because frankly, JFK wanted to keep some things secret too, and
Yeah.
part of this speech was intended to kind of deflect the criticisms that were being leveled against him for what he was keeping secret, even though he was actually already well known as somebody opposed to the CIA by this time. So, and of course, I mean, that's probably why he got killed. But yeah, so the fact that that JFK is not the first one. Eisenhower was not the first one. We've had lots of presidents warning us about,
Yeah.
the danger of secrecy. And in fact, it's ancient. Even going way back into, Cicero. It's not like secrets or anything new. It's just that when you've got secret societies, secret oaths, like what JFK referred to, um, and you've got people doing secret things behind closed doors,
Mhm.
there will be abuse of power, and it's kind of like, as much as my anarchist friends have a good point about how wonderful that would be if we didn't have any government at all. It
Mm.
only takes a couple of people to prop up a king. That king can, assemble an army in secret, and then we all have a king. And it's really, it's really something we have to be careful about, to have any secrets at all that are not at least under, what I proposed in, my press release, and I'm going to propose again, is that there are no secrets that are not at least available to our U.S. Congress. That, at least we should have elected representatives who know what's going on, and they have to be accountable for what's going on, and they have to be
And
accountable for the money, and there can't be any off books funding ever, ever, ever again.
and I think that's really, really important that people understand and that we work to change. Um, First of all, by voting people into office that believe the same as we do, and that is that why do we have all of these black programs? And a tiny example of it is the recent UAP, UFO, whatever you want to call it, these hearings that are held and that are being held in Congress, and they're talking about things that these congressmen have no idea about.
Yeah. And you always have to wonder, when they bring these things up, whether it's a deflection or whether there actually is stuff going on there or whatever. And it could be all of the above. But
Right,
but
right.
the fact is, it's awfully coincidental how many times it's been that something really bad is happening that we know about, and then they say, "Oh, look, here's another shiny thing," and we tend to be like
Exactly.
raccoons, and we collect
Oh
our
yeah.
little bits of aluminum foil and bottle caps, and we miss the big picture, that our
Yeah.
government is lying to us and taking stuff from us and hurting us.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's a great point. And I think there's a whole lot of look over here, not over here going on at all aspects, but especially right now, there is so much going on. We just had the Epstein documents and everything else
Oh,
that's happening, and we have all of these quote distractions going on. I not to change the subject, but I do want to make people aware. For those of you who may not know, I want to show you guys. It's estimated in the 2018 midterm elections, winning a Senate seat typically cost $15.7 million. Now,
yep.
do you think that's accidental? Let's be honest, that's for a reason. And it is so that regular people are, there's no way in hell any regular person can raise $15 million.
Well, let me address that. This is a big problem, that it's our fault. It's all our fault. And, I don't know how many times I've heard people telling me, oh, that the influence of money in politics is terrible. Oh, that's so corrupt. And these people giving money. And I know that
Mhm.
it makes bad policy. But Andy, you don't raise enough money. I can't vote for you because you don't have 15.7 million. And no,
Bingo.
you can't have it both ways. You
Mhm.
can't do that. If you're gonna vote for somebody because of the amount of money they have, and you don't care where it comes from, then you're screwing up. You're the
Right.
problem. And,
Right.
and so when it comes to things like, yard signs are a good example of this. I hate yard signs. I
Oh, I hate
hate more than I hate yard signs though, is I hate that they work. The fact that that you
Mhm.
actually have to get yard signs, and that something in our brains, as voters, requires it. Oh gosh, I read it in a bumper sticker. That's significant. I learned a lot from this yard sign. No, that's not how we should be doing any of this stuff. And you think about how we hire any other job in the world. We would not hire janitors the way we hire politicians.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So moving forward, obviously we collectively have made a lot of mistakes in the past and allowed some things to get absolutely rampant. How do we fix it moving forward? What are the steps that we each individually should be implementing to ensure that we take back our government?
Well, that's the whole last chapter of my book. But
Okay. Buy
essentially,
the book.
yeah, by the book and all our problems are
Buy
solved.
the book.
No, it still requires that we do things, and that's where, unfortunately, it comes down to us in everything. And so, even though I do make proposals of law and in changes and proposals and resolutions, that's in the book. I got that in there. But the one thing that I've been criticized in my book about is, Andy, that you're still not really solving the problem because you're saying that we have to do something different, and we can't do something different. Yes, you have to do something different.
Mhm.
There is no getting around the fact that we have to vote different. First, we have to try our peaceful means of revolution. We have to have a revolution. All revolutions start up here anyway. So,
Right.
first we have to get our heads straight. And that, I think, may be happening.
Mhm.
So,
I
you
agree
know,
with you. I think
I,
it's in the process of.
I think that
Yeah.
there is a revolution that's taking place.
Mhm.
It's slow, and I wish it would be happening faster and more decisively. We'll see what happens by 2024 election, but that's where the rubber meets the road. We first have to try our peaceful means of revolution. Second
Okay.
of all, I didn't really make a case for this in the book because I didn't want it, to be too. I was trying to be very pleasant, and I think you'll like my book.
Okay.
But we have to be, and civil disobedience has to be a part of the recipe. We have to start pushing back. And third, we have to start replacing government. And so, one of the things I would most like to do in this campaign is go to Kiwanis and churches and Rotary clubs and start telling them, guys, you've been losing your membership, you've been losing your relevance in society. You guys used to be the ones that built parks, you used to repair roads. The church used to be our Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. If your barn burned down, it was a congregation that built it back up. I would like to go back to these people and say, listen, you're about to be called on because our government's failing us. And when our government pulls away the safety nets, we've got to be ready to pick up the slack. We've got to start, people who can garden have to garden. People who
Okay.
can hunt have to hunt. We're going to have to start finding alternative means of monetary trade, especially if we go to CBDCs. And we're going to have to start finding our own means of trade if we want to have anything like liberty and justice. So and this is not even like, this isn't like grabbing your gun and putting on a ghillie suit kind of stuff. This is just getting more connected to your local culture, and making your local society more relevant in your daily life. And that is, when you see what typically happens when nations go bad, um, it's it's not the M16 that's going to be relevant. It's going to be
Right.
it's going to be your neighbors,
Yes.
and you've got to be you've got to be able to cooperate with your local community. I live in a rural area. I'm just surrounded by farmers. I live on a farm. It's going to be easier for me than it's going to be for people in cities. But
Yes.
people in cities are going to have to work extra hard to find alternative food sources and things when things go bad, because things may in very short order go very bad in ways that we have never experienced, certainly not in our lifetimes, and maybe not ever in our country.
Right. And I want to jump in real quick, because a lot of people have this, I guess, misnomer or this misconception that it has to be this that causes things to go bad, or it has to be this big epic thing. Whether it's a civil war, whether it's, a stolen election, whether it's this or that, and things are just going to suddenly devolve. The big thing that people need to realize, look, I'm from Louisiana originally. Look at Hurricane Katrina. Natural disasters are just as capable of creating civil disorder, unrest, and the breakdown of our system as some man-made event, whether it is hurricane, tornado, any of these things. And yes, there could be, an attack on a power grid or something, but there have been countless examples of natural things that happened that caused the society to break down. And one of the most critical things, in my opinion, that you can do is have a network of friends and family, neighbors that can come together in that circumstance in order to defend and protect one another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where, and in fact, Perry just made a comment here, the violence between left and right it's kind of happening. That the left has already made promises. In fact, we're going to be taking this to the streets, and they sure did it in 2020.
Yes.
And really, one of the things I would love to be able to do on a debate stage, and I've done it before on a debate stage, where I'm almost like a marriage counselor between, the Democrats and Republicans. Come on, you guys, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We don't need to be doing this. And that's where, I'm always asked. In fact, was that just last night? Somebody asked me. Yeah, just last night, somebody was just asking me, all right, who would you caucus with? Well, look at what happens even within the parties. They have caucuses and sub-caucuses within the Republican and Democrat parties. They got Black Caucus. The Republicans even have like log cabin Republicans. They've got all kinds of little mini caucuses left and right.
Right.
Why don't we, just look at this in a reasonable way and say the idea of caucuses, I mean, it's kind of inevitable. It's like political parties. We're not ever going to really get rid of them, because it's,
right.
We're tribal species. It's just how it is. But I will caucus with whoever's right. If somebody's saying something right. I mean, I even said this last night when even AOC is right sometimes. She's been
occasionally
notably right sometimes, and Bernie has been notably right sometimes. And so,
who I'm fascinated about that has been right a terrifyingly large amount of time recently, and that is John Fetterman.
the conspiracy theory about that is that he was replaced by a clone, but
right, or a mask or a clone or something. Yeah. Everybody's replaced. Everything's a television show or whatever.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know. What I do know for sure, that's unarguable, is that he has said some wrong. Absolutely spot on things lately that have made me go, is that the same guy?
Yeah. Well, and then we've got people like RFK, who's actually, RFK Jr., who has been saying a lot of really good stuff and making people think about, maybe this two-party, maybe I don't have to vote for either Democrat or Republican, because this RFK Jr. going out on his own is doing pretty good.
So I don't know if you probably know about it, but one thing that I found very odd was, instead of RFK running as an independent, he's actually trying to form his own party. Did you see that? Yeah. Called I think it's We the People Party or something. I think that's what it's called, but that could change. But one thing that I wondered is, why didn't he go for like Libertarian or some other already established party? Because isn't it going to make it much more difficult for him? It is.
And to get on all 50 state ballots. And he did. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when he talked to the Libertarian Party leaders. And he did. And so
interesting.
He did meet with them. And I have a feeling the Libertarian Party probably is the side that said, you're really not libertarian enough, which would be frustrating, because there are a lot of Libertarian presidential candidates who are not as libertarian as RFK Jr. is.
Right.
RFK Jr. has actually got a pretty strong libertarian streak, with some exceptions, and maybe those exceptions are what the the Libertarian leader said, sorry, you can't do it. I don't know what happened. Maybe it was RFK who said that. Similar to the way Justin Amash was talking about running for president on the Libertarian ticket. And he ultimately said, you know what, there's a lot of stuff going on I don't want to mess with. And my chances are not good. And he backed out. And so I don't know what happened. I do know that the discussion did happen, and I wish I knew what happened, but I don't.
I'm going to jump in here real quick because there's some questions that I want to make sure that I get to. First of all, what's your favorite restaurant?
Oh God, yeah, you could probably tell by looking at me. I love eating, and that's where I it's kind of like what my favorite sports car is. It depends on the day, and I don't know.
Okay.
I love eating, and I love good food.
There's something to be said for good food. I mean, there really is. Are you a cat person, a dog person?
Oh, definitely a dog person. I
Okay.
believe dogs are from heaven. They're angels from heaven, and cats are from that other place. Perry Shepard and I have had issues on this before, but
fair enough. What did you want to be when you were a kid? Like, what did you want to grow up to be?
I don't even really, this is so long ago now. This is almost 100 years ago now at this point. But I actually don't remember having any strong desire to be anything when I was a little kid. I was kind of blown by, I was a Gemini. And so, I'm blown by the winds. Didn't have that kind of fireman versus astronaut thing going on.
Fair enough. Okay, into a little bit meatier. I only got a couple of these because you answered a lot of them. I assume your answers haven't changed. If you guys really want to know, we got into a lot of these questions the last time that I had Andy on the show. Go back, watch that. But a couple things have changed since then. So, what do you believe is the number one challenge that the United States faces today?
Well, it's always a spiritual battle. I mean, it's where our head is at is always the battle, and whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're Jewish, Muslim, it doesn't matter. The issue, depending on what you call spiritual, our collective mindset is what actually a nation is. A nation is a collective abstraction, right? I mean, there is no person called a nation. And so if you're talking about, what our biggest single national problem is, whatever it is, it's a figment of our collective imagination or, our spiritual condition. From my perspective, it's, I would put it in terms of spiritual. But I think an awful lot of people would at least understand it as being a, sort of a cultural phenomenon that we have these waves of thinking that change rapidly, like the transgender movement right now, things like that would have been unconscionable even 20 years ago to the degree that we see it today, and yet here we are, and medical situations aside, what happened with COVID and with the drugs that we give kids to change their gender. We know that there are medical things that we're not, we're lied about, lots of lies, but it's a cultural phenomenon that we're susceptible to because of where our head's at. And we have become very weak, and whatever you say the cause is, the condition of our mental psychological state is really not, I mean, it's unquestionably the big problem. That it's because it's represented in our votes. What our brain and our voting fingers are connected.
Right. So a big issue right now, and it goes back to something you said. I know where you fall on this, but I want to make sure that our viewers understand where you're at. You talked about privacy and, more importantly, secrecy in our government, and the fact that even Congress doesn't know a lot of things that are actually happening. Mm-hmm. Two U.S. Democratic senators recently said that there is very little oversight going on over the NSA right now. What are your thoughts on the NSA, and would you do anything about having more oversight over the NSA?
Well, I would use, in the words of President Millet, afuera. Get rid of it. It's the NSA it's a dangerous organization, and it's lied to us many times. They've been caught lying, and then they said we're not going to do that anymore. We caught them doing it again. They have outlived their usefulness, and just in terms of the way our spy agencies work, they actually get to a point where they don't even have to do the evil deeds anymore. And you see with things like Operation Northwoods and what they did with Google, they corporatize their evil deeds. They farm it out, and they have other people make money off of doing bad things to us. So it's CIA, FBI, NSA. I mean, NSA, CIA are basically the same thing. They've got to go. They've got to go.
Is Snowden a hero or a villain?
Hero.
What about Julian Assange?
Hero.
Okay. All right.
I mean, hero is a strong word.
It is a strong word.
I would say that
not a terrorist.
Yeah. I mean, I would say Snowden was more hero. He took, he was more inside, took great risks, and Assange, I don't think he believed he was in as much danger as Snowden knew he was.
Right.
And so I think, I would say that Snowden was more hero, and Assange is a good guy who got, unfairly treated. Bordering on hero, but
fair. Perry has a question, and that is how you feel about hemp legalization, criminalization versus deregulation / no taxation.
Well, I will go stronger than just hemp. I would say that since the 21st Amendment, the 18th Amendment arguably gave our government the authority to ban the manufacture, sale, and distribution of intoxicating liquors, not the consumption or the purchase of intoxicating liquors. It was only the manufacture, sale, and distribution. The 21st Amendment eliminated that authority. They knew that they had to amend the Constitution to grant the government the right to ban anything at all in terms of, manufacture, sale, or distribution. And in a republic, if we're talking about the difference between, equity and law, you can't tell people they can't buy or consume things in an actual republic according to the original definition of those things. Right. So once the 21st Amendment came along, it became unconstitutional for our government to ban the manufacture, sale, distribution, consumption, or purchase of anything. And so, you think about all of the thousands of pages of regulation on the sale of chicken or cabbage or, any of this stuff. That's all unconstitutional. Or a constitution would have to be, you can argue all you want. Okay, I'll even say, okay, if you believe that marijuana has got negative things in it, sure, it's got great medicinal properties. Hemp is magical for all kinds of stuff. You could use it for building materials, for food, medicine. It's great stuff. But let's just say you think it's terrible. Okay, you have to go through a process to amend the Constitution to outlaw it. And we haven't done that. And if you do the process, then it's going to open up the discussion to a wider audience than just the people who initially said, oh, I don't want that. It took a lot to amend the Constitution to prohibit the sale, the manufacture, sale, and distribution of intoxicating liquors. It would be harder to do that with hemp now. And, I live on a little farm that I'd love to be able to grow hemp in my hayfield, but the regulations, even though, technically you can grow hemp in Indiana, the regulations make it impractical for me anyway.
Right. It makes it extremely difficult, and it's designed that way for a reason. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, so to answer the question very specifically, it's unconstitutional to do anything other than to completely decriminalize it. I mean,
so one of the things that I wanted to touch on for the viewers is when we were talking about the three-letter agencies and there shouldn't be allowed to create the rules and regulations that they do. One of the big things coming down the pipeline is the Chevron with the Supreme Court and the potential that this is going to snowball into essentially deregulation or elimination of many of the three-letter agencies, fingers crossed. But how would you help, if elected, to finalize that process and ensure that all these three-letter agencies go bye-bye where they should be?
Well, actually, that is one of the resolutions that I have in the end of my book, and I actually have had that on my blog site forever. Also, it's just the fact is between the 9th and 10th Amendments, it's very clear that that not only do we have all rights that are not specifically taken away, that's the Ninth Amendment, in writing, but the 10th Amendment is very clear in saying that the federal government has no power that's not specifically granted to it in writing. And so, using the 9th and 10th Amendments as actionable law, my resolution says, in short, we've got to get rid of everything that's not constitutional. And yes, it would take some time. And so I proposed, putting together a little commission, like they have a lot of these little study commissions to put a timetable, and with it's got to be within 10 years that we get this done. But, understanding there are a lot of things that are, that we depend on, we've come to depend on, that are unconstitutional. And it would take some time to dissect ourselves away from it and keep our promises. So, I don't think that we should pull the rug out from under people just immediately. We have to find ways to find free market solutions and cultural solutions to things that the government has taken over. But similar to the way I was talking before about Kiwanis and Rotary clubs and churches have to pick up and start replacing things. We have to get rid of stuff from the government. We just have to. And so my guidebook would be the Constitution. And most things that our government does is unconstitutional. Most agencies are unconstitutional. And that's where their powers, like the whole of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Eisenhower had when he created it, he had reservations about it, and he had some regrets after he did it. And that has been a tremendously expensive, monstrously expensive agency. Look at what the size of Medicare and Social Security. What a huge percentage of our federal outlay that is, and what a bad administration. It's a horrible deal for everybody. Oh, yeah. And as a retired guy, I'm very sympathetic to people who are dependent on it, but we've got to do something different.
So let me ask you, because this actually leads into a lot of people's main hang up, I guess, as far as voting Libertarian, right? The big thing, roads, right? But one of the things that people have said to me is, well, one of the things that worries me is if we do go Libertarian, we're going to see agencies that many, many people depend on, such as, FSSA, benefits for those that are disabled. My wife actually works in the industry. She's a Medicaid waiver case manager. She takes care of people and gets them services that are intellectually disabled. So what is your outlook on that? And basically, are you in favor of cutting off funding to an administration like that? Or is it more of we need to run it better?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, it'll take time to dissect away the federal connections with things. But, look at how many things are better at the federal level than at the local level? National defense? Yes. Almost anything else? No. Even Medicare is mostly administered as a state level thing with, the more local you can keep things, the more distributed and local you can keep things, the more efficient it is. The more likely it is that you're going to be able to know something about the cases that you're working on. And so in the case of like what your wife is doing, you have individual caseworkers at a very local level working with individual people. And that's the way it's got to work. And so, we have it broken down mostly. It used to be almost entirely at the county level and even more local than that, where if there was any government involvement at all, it would be at the, the much more local level. And, a good example of this is what happened to our common schools, where, initially, we were supposed to have a common schools endowed fund in Indiana. That was, the whole thing with Article 8. It even mentioned how the funding was supposed to, wasn't supposed to involve personal property tax at all. And it was supposed to be state level funding, but it was administered at the local level with the understanding that there would be equal, common schools, meant that it would be the same level of education, whether it's a poor area or a rich area. That's the whole point of having state funding. I mean, and what happened is we tied it to property tax, which then meant that rich areas got rich schools, poor areas got poor schools. And then we ended up getting federalized with the Department of Education between 1979 and 80, and look what's happened to the cost and quality of education ever since. So everything we've done that we've nationalized, we've screwed up, and it's an inherent problem. It's not just something it's inherently evil because it's federal. It's inherently stupid because it's concentrated and it's centralized. Centralized does not make sense. It's inefficient inherently, and it's inherently going to be problematic. And when it's something where you're expecting services, and the more separation you have between the people paying for the service and the people providing the service, the worse it's going to be.
I agree. Tim has a question for you. He says, what would you do about the Federal Reserve?
Oh, get rid of it. Yeah, I mean, I'll get rid of it and replace it with nothing. Actually, there's a whole chapter on that in my book. And so I've got a history, the history of the Federal Reserve, what it would be like if it actually was private bankers running it for only bankers. And it's not. A lot of people say, oh, it's only, it's just private. No, there's nothing private about it. I mean, the whole point is that they federalize and monetize political debt, and
Elizabeth says Medicaid is a state program, but
true.
it does
Medicaid,
involve the federal government to set a budget and divvy it up.
Medicaid definitely is, yes. Medicare as a there's and that's just like Social Security, SSI, SSA. There's lots of different subunits of all of this stuff, but yes. And that's where, and in fact, what she's saying about Medicaid, that was originally how it was supposed to work with our state schools, where it was supposed to be state funding. And then you had, local administrators at the county level and even more local than that would actually divvy up the money that was supposed to be creating an equitable, same sort of education system for all of these areas. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on, guys. If you have any questions for him, drop them in the chat real quick. Hopefully he'll come back on. Let me ask you a question while they're getting those in real quick. So I know how Republican primaries and Democrat primaries work. How does the Libertarian primary work? Do you have an opponent, or are
we're
you
not
just
allowed
the only one chosen?
Yeah, we're not allowed in the primaries. So
okay,
we're specifically excluded from primaries, as is everybody who's not a Democrat or Republican. So we do what other states. Not all states have primary elections. Like Iowa caucus, they have caucuses, and that's basically what we do. We have a convention that's going to be in March, and that's when we select our candidates. But at the state level, we have it in March, and then in May is going to be the national convention in Washington, D.C., where we're going to pick the POTUS.
Okay. So I guess the question is, in order for you to go on to the general, is there a process for you and your party that you have to go through?
Yeah, and that's going to be at the state convention. So I'm not technically the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate now. That's going to have to go through a process. I mean, I might not win, but I mean, my goal is to crush the enemy and enjoy the lamentation of their loved ones. But I'm going to be probably the candidate after March 6th, March 3rd, March 6th, something early March.
Oh, early March. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, after your hopefully primary victory, we'll be rooting for you. Would love to talk to you about coming back on, because that'll be shortly after that. I believe the Republican primary should be over. I believe
June.
I think no, it's before that. I think it's May, the beginning of May, May 6th.
Yeah, I'm not invited. So
right. Let's see here. It says Perry says, if you're going to the LPIN con in March, then bring a friend. And Tim would like you to know that he has news. So reach out to him.
Cool.
As always, I'm going to drop out of here for a minute and let you tell people if they want to support you, if they want to go. Okay, hold on. We got convention is March 2nd in Fishers. Chuck.
Yep. Thank you, Chuck.
There we go. Yeah. Everybody, if you want to, I don't know if it's open or if it's a invitation only kind of deal. How is it set up, Chuck? Or do you know, Andy?
Yeah, well, you can't vote obviously if you're not a member of the party. So
Okay.
it's it's kind of like primaries. You can vote in our primaries if you have to declare you're a Democrat or Republican in the primary, and you have to be a Libertarian to vote in the convention.
Makes
But
sense.
we're Libertarians. I doubt we'd bar anybody at the door.
Fair enough.
It
Fair
just
enough. I'm going to let you address the crowd such as it is. And listen, people, if you want to support him, I would say the number one thing is buy his book. But seriously, though, if you want to support him, go to horningforsenate.com or look him up on Facebook, The Andy Horning. It is scrolling across the bottom of your screen. I'm going to give him an opportunity to kind of wrap up his case. And there you go.
Yeah. Well, I think I've made my case pretty well. Let me just see if there are any, if anybody has any questions. And Chuck did clarify that anyone is welcome to come to the business meeting. It's just you're not going to be able to vote on candidates and things like that unless you're a member of the party. And let's see, and Perry Shepard's going to kick in the door. So basically, I would like, I of course. Notwithstanding what I said about the money in politics being a big problem, I need money, and so if you can donate to horningforsenate.com, I'd be much obliged. If you have questions, you can ask me. I've got contact information there, and I love it when people ask questions because it's such a rare thing anymore. I once put my cell phone number out when I ran for governor. My cell phone went out in several news in media outlets, so they put my cell phone out there, and I got, I don't know if anybody wants to put in the chat how many calls you think I got from the state of Indiana when I was running for governor, and I had my cell phone out there, and how many people actually called me and took my invitation to ask me questions.
That's my guess.
Do you remember it when I said that? Yes, it was it was 5.
That was a pure guess based on my, yeah. I've had people put their phone numbers out there, and it is shocking. A lot of people are afraid to put their phone number out there because they're afraid they'll get inundated.
Yeah. And I wouldn't do it now because of
nowadays,
all the
right?
Spammers and all that stuff. But yeah.
But yeah, I was shocked, absolutely shocked at how few people actually choose to get involved and ask questions and truly get to know the candidates that are running. It's one of the reasons why I do this show, is so that we have an opportunity to sit down with people that are one of them is going to be elected to represent us in our representative form of government, our republic. And it's shocking to me how few people give a damn.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, Perry just said that he called me in 2000, and that's correct. And if I'm remembering correctly, you asked me about marijuana back then as well. It's more memorable when only 5 people call you. So that's it's not like I remember everybody and
right,
but and all the questions, but. Yeah, it's shocking how few. We already mentioned how few people show up to public forums.
Yeah,
that's another thing. If you guys have any influence in any groups that I can talk to, I would love to find groups to talk to, and I would love to find forums for public engagement of any kind. If we can get like a candidate forum at a local church basement or at a a lot of organizations have stopped having forums that used to. So like the League of Women's Voters, Larry Bouchon threatened to sue the League of Women's Voters in Southern Indiana, and they ended up stopping. They just don't hold them anymore. And it's very sad that candidates have influence on whether they're going to be job interviews or not. And it's kind of like, how many candidates for any other job could say, you know what, I'm not going to do this resume and interview thing. I think you just need to hire me.
Right.
And who could get away with that? And yet that's exactly what's happening these days.
Yeah. And a lot of people have a misconception about, I guess, getting to know the candidate and exactly how this is, how it works. It's literally a job interview. These people are trying to show you why they should be selected to represent you. You should absolutely ask all the questions that you have on your mind. And it is shocking and abysmal that so many of these people are able to just not get questioned and not be scrutinized whatsoever. They put out a couple of, they have their team handle their social media, and you don't talk to the candidate anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's disgusting. But if more people took it seriously and more people looked at it as the job interview that it is, I think we would have very different representatives instead of a simple popularity contest or who can throw more money at it.
And that's why I'm putting the call out to you guys. If you know of any groups that I can talk to, I would be much obliged if we could arrange something where I can get in front of the group and do what we're doing here. Talk a little, answer questions. I want to hear from you guys as much as you want to hear from me. I'm
right,
sure.
Absolutely. And I want to put it out there. If anybody isn't sure how this works, they don't know how to do something like this setup right here, I am more than happy to host. I don't even have to be involved. You're more than welcome to use the setup. I'll set everybody up and just not even be involved. I am personally a huge proponent of getting to know your representatives and the people on your ballot. So it's out there. Feel free to contact me or the channel by all means. Thank you very much for appearing on the show and taking time out of your evening and your campaign to talk to us. And we wish you luck, and we'd like to have you on again.
Thank you very much. It's great talking to you.
You too.
Look forward to it. See ya.
Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Andy Horning. He is running for United States Senate. He is running as a Libertarian, and you can learn more about him as it shows on the bottom of the page, horningforsenate.com, or on Facebook, The Andy Horning. Look him up. What have you got to lose? I will say this, regardless of anything and everything that you may believe in politically, these people, 99.999 ad infinitum % of these people do not work for us. They do not work for you. They do not work for me. They care about themselves. As you can see, based on the financial disclosures of these people, they make far more money in office than they ever did out of office. There's a reason for that. And it's time to change. It's time to change the formula. It's time for us as people to wake up. It's time for us to vote differently. Look, I'm a Republican. I'm a registered Republican, but I believe in voting for the best candidate, the best person, regardless of their political party. I have not voted for, I have not pulled an R ballot, I think, ever since I started voting, because I vote for the individual. I also don't like, I don't like that method of voting for a variety of reasons. It causes so many problems. But anyway, Chuck brings up a good point. Could libertarians do any worse at this point? Look, the Libertarian Party has, I mean, there have been some people that have run for office under the Libertarian name that you look at and you're like, yeah, no. At the same time, there have been people run under Democrat or Republican that are shockingly frightening. Not all of them, thankfully, have won. Some have, but there have been some truly, truly frightening candidates from every single political party out there. So judging someone based on a political party or them belonging to a certain group it's un-American. It simply is. And I think all of us need to do a lot more research into the people that we elect to represent us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to look through my channel, look at some of the videos that I've done, look at the candidates that I've interviewed, because that's my goal, is to make you a more educated voter. That's all I can ask, because an educated voter is an intelligent voter. That's just my opinion. Do with it what you will. If you or anyone you know is running for office, wants to run for office, or even is just wants to get involved, then I would hope that you would reach out to us. I'm looking for my banner. Is that the one? No. Anyway, email me, talk@dionbergeron.com. That is talk@dionbergeron.com. I hope that you'll do so. And even if you're not coming on, if you're not running for office, or you're just somebody who gives a damn, reach out. I'd love to have you on the show. We'll have a great conversation. We'll have people in the chat, and Perry said, and I agree with Perry, it's time to chop a new path through the wilderness wholeheartedly. And with that, I hope that you have a wonderful evening. Look, for those of you who may have wanted to watch this on Rumble, I wasn't able to get the stream going in time, but I am going to upload it. So watch it on Rumble and in a little bit once I get done. So as always, God bless you. God bless Indiana, and God bless the United States.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Sean Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2024. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.